Okay, so we're going to be dealing with the NIF All stem here in chapter 26 of Ross, the NIF All stem. And what I have in front of you, this is not something that you need to write down. I just wanted to show you that in the Hebrew verbal system, the Hebrew verbal system is built off of 7 main stems. And so you've learned the cal stem here. Which, as we have gone through most of the verb forms, they're usually verbs that are action verbs. We do have some stative verbs in the cal. They frequently are transitive, that is, they can take a direct object. And then the rest of the stems are really derived from the cal stem in terms of the way you form them. So the cal stem is the most basic stem. And then what we do is we manipulate the verbal root with other patterns in order to create these other stems that then add some other semantic value, usually to the meaning of the verb in the cal stem. Now, the NIF All stem is the first derived stem that we're going to learn among the 7 major stems. So we'll have acquired 2 stems when we're finished with lesson 26. And then here in the middle, I have 3 of the other stems, the PL, PUAL, and HISPIL. These 3 are bunched together because they are formed similarly to each other, in that the PL, PUAL, and HISPIL are all going to double root 2. And then the HIFIL and HOFAL are the last 2 stems we'll learn, and those are grouped together also because they are formed similarly, both of them getting hey prefixes as part of their stem formation. Now, the names of the stems are basically a result of using a particular verb as the paradigm verb in older Hebrew grammars. And that verb was the verb pa'al, spelled pe, ayin, lamed. And the vowel patterns for the stems applied to the verb pa'al, which means to do or to make, is what came to then be used the way they sounded for the names of the stems in general. So pa'al would be the cal perfect, he made. If we add NIF All formations and vowel pointing to pa'al, we get the word NIF All for the NIF All perfect 3ms. So the NIF All typically made a verb passive if it had an active meaning in the cal. So NIF All would be something like he was made or it was made. So notice that the literal form, it was made, is NIF All, and that is going to sound exactly like the name of the stem, NIF All. Okay? The PL and PUAL, if you applied the vowel pointing for those stems to the verb pa'al, you'd get PL and PUAL, which happens to be the name of the stem. HITHPIL, same thing. Pa'al is here. For this stem, you add a hith prefix and these vowel points, and you get the word HITHPIL. And then HIF-IL is the HIFIL formation added to pe, ayin, lamed verb root. And HOFAL is added here, HOF-AL. And so if you're wondering, where do these names for the stems come from? They just come from the fact that ancient grammarians, older grammarians, used the verb pa'al to form these stems. Now, Ross is going to use a different paradigm verb. He's going to use the verb pakad. And there's a very good reason for that. If you remember, I told you that the PL and PUAL and HITHPIL, these verbs typically double root 2 in their formation. But look at the root 2 letter. It's a guttural. Well, can you put a doubling dot in a guttural? You cannot. And so in the actual form of the PL of the verb pa'al, you're supposed to get a doubling dot and you can't see one. So it makes a very lousy paradigm verb, okay? But for the verb that we've been using, pakad, the kof can be doubled. So it makes a better paradigm verb. So that is what we're going to use, but I just want you to see why the stems are called what they are called. I will make one other comment about the verbal system here. This is what I'm about to say is very general, okay? it's not true for every verb in each of these stems. But if a verb has a NIF All and there is a cal form of it, then the NIF All will typically make the verb's cal meaning passive. So if the cal of pakad is he visited, the NIF All would mean he was visited, passive. Okay? The PL and the PUAL typically intensify a verb's meaning. So if you take the verb shavar in the cal, to break, and you put it into the PL and make it shiber, then it means to break into pieces or to shatter. The PUAL takes the meaning of the PL and makes it passive. So again, taking the verb shavar in the PL, shiber is to shatter. The PUAL, shubar, would be it was shattered, make it passive. And the hithpael takes the verb's meaning in the PL and makes it passive reflexive. So maybe something like they shattered one another. The hifil and hofal add the causative nuance to a verb's meaning in the cal typically. So if the verb pakad in the cal means to visit, if we put it in the hifil, it means to cause someone to visit. And the hofal just makes it passive, to be caused to visit. Okay? So that's the basic semantics, but there's a lot of exceptions to this, and we're going to cover each of the stems in turn with each chapter that we do for the next several chapters, and you'll learn a lot more about the possible meanings of these different stems. But today, for now, we're going to focus on the NIF All. So let's do that. So you should have a handout in front of you that looks basically like this. And this is what I call the principal parts sheet. All right? The principal parts. When we learn the stems, the first thing that we're going to really want to focus on is what are called the principal parts. The principal parts sheet here is going to give you all 7 stems, and it's going to lay out a representative form for each conjugation pattern that you've learned. So if you look on the left-hand side here, I have, for example, the perfect 3MS, and we're going to give you that form for all the stems. So the cal perfect 3MS, as you know, is pakad. We give you the imperfect 3MS form. So the cal imperfect 3MS is yif code. The vayiktal form, or the WCI, vayif code. The jussive, yif code. The cohortative, f kada. The imperative, pakod. We're giving the most basic forms of these. The infinitive construct, which is, the participle, pokad, is the masculine singular form. The imperative, pakod, is the 2MS form. The infinitive construct, pakod, and the infinitive absolute is pakod. All right? What I've tried to do here is to give you, for all of these, the uninflected form as far as the back side of this goes. So the perfect 3MS is the one with the least baggage on it, okay? The imperfect 3MS has the prefix yod but no ending. The WCI has a prefix yod for the 3MS but no ending. The jussive here is the basic 3MS. If you know, the 3MP would add a shurik here. So we're just trying to get the most basic forms here. The cohortative, we've picked the first common singular because the singular is the one you think of first before the plural. The imperative, of course, the 2MS is uninflected on the end. The participle, it's the masculine singular form that has no ending. It's uninflected. The infinitive construct, it doesn't have any personal endings. You can add a pronominal suffixes to them if you want to. And the infinitive absolute is never inflected at all. So that's the forms of the cal. What we're going to learn are the NIF All principal parts. And what I'm going to ask you to do for the NIF All is not, okay, this is critical, I do not want you to go to page 108 and 188 and 189, and I do not want you to memorize the entire paradigm, just like you did for the cal perfect and the cal imperfect and the cal jussive and all of that. I'm not going to have you do that for all the stems. What I want you to learn are the principal parts for each stem. That is to say, the most basic form of each stem here. And then once you know the principal part, once you know the NIF All Perfect looks something like this for the 3MS, if you know all of your personal endings, then you're going to be able to identify the NIF All Perfect 3FS. You'd be able to identify the NIF All Perfect 2MS because the perfect conjugation uses all the same personal endings that the Cal Perfect uses, okay? The NIF All Perfect and the Cal Perfect will use the same personal endings. You already know them all. What you don't know is what prefixes are going to happen and which vowel points are going to happen. That's going to be something we learn with each stem, okay? So what I'm trying to do is help you minimize the memorization process here, okay? Now, let's start by looking at the NIF All Perfect. And I want you to see here that the perfect 3MS, the representative form in our principal parts is NIF Cod. NIF Cod. What do you see with NIF Cod here? Well, my 3 root letters is going to take a noon prefix with a Keurig under it, and the Shava here is going to be a silent Shava. All right? So that's a silent Shava there. NIF. NIF. And then under root 2, what I call the theme vowel is an A-class vowel, the Pathak. NIF Cod. Okay? Now, let's take this, and I'm going to transfer this basic form over to my practice sheet. So let me pull that up. Okay, so I have my Cal Perfect practice sheet up here, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to scratch out Cal, and I'm going to write the word NIF All here. I want to show you actually how easy this is. At least I think it's easy, and after about 10 seconds, you'll think it's easy. I'm just kidding, of course. What is the NIF All Perfect 3MS based on that principal part that we just saw? Well, it involves adding a prefix what? Prefix noon. What vowel goes under it? Keurig. What goes under root 1? A silent Shava. Okay. I want a silent Shava. NIF. And then what is the theme vowel? The root 2 vowel? Pathak. Okay. So that's my vowel pointing for the NIF All Perfect 3MS. As I told you, the NIF All typically makes the meaning of a verb in the Cal stem passive. So if the Cal, pakad, means he visited, the NIF All Perfect means he what? He was visited. Okay? That's our typical sort of NIF All semantics, is to make the Cal meaning passive. NIF Cod. Now, what if I want to say she was visited? I don't want to use the NIF All Perfect 3MS. I want to change the form to 3FS. What do I do? Well, let's start with our basic form here. NIF Cod. Okay. And what am I going to do with this? Well, what is the perfect 3FS personal ending? If you've forgotten, I've given you a handout. Take a look. You have this handout in front of you. And if you remember, these little boxes here stand for any 3 root letters. And this is helpful because the perfect personal endings are going to apply to every stinking stem of the Hebrew verbal system. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether we're using the Cal Perfect or the NIF All Perfect or the PL Perfect. The third feminine singular personal ending is what? It's kamate. Doesn't matter the stem. So you already know these personal endings here. So let's add these personal endings to our verb. So nifkad becomes nifka da if I want to say she was visited. Okay? Now, there's one minor change that has to happen here. When I add the kamate to the dalet will no longer be closing the syllable. It's going to slide over and take the vowel and lead it, which makes the kof open and now pretonic. What will Hebrew do with open pretonic syllables? Reduce them to vocal shava. Exactly. So nifkad becomes nifkada becomes nifkuda. Okay? So anytime I have a vocalic ending, an ending that begins with a vowel, it's going to steal root 3 away and leave root 2 in an open position, and it will reduce to vocal shava. Now that only happens 2 places in the perfect, as you remember. 2FS and 3CP. Those are the only vocalic endings. All the endings in the second person and first person are consonantal endings, and consonantal endings do not take root 3 away because they aren't vowels. They don't start with vowels. The root 3 gets to stay closed with root 2. All right, so NIF kada is she was visited. Let's take a look at the 2MS form. Again, if I start with my basic paradigm, NIF kad for the 3MS, and I want to add the 2MS personal ending, what do I add? Well, you know this, don't you? It's ta. What goes under the dalet, root 3? It's a silent shiva, right? So it's NIF kad ta. The subject is you, but this is a passive meaning verb. NIF kad ta is you were visited or appointed. Okay? And my accent's going to be on the kof here. NIF kad ta. NIF kad ta. What about the 2FS? What would I do here? Well, the NIF All Perfect always has the NIF All Noon with the Keurig, silent shiva, and my basic form, the 3MS is NIF kad, but I want to add a 2FS ending, which is what? It's t with a silent shiva, and the dalet also has a silent shiva. So it's NIF kad. NIF kad. That's you, woman, were visited. And then the first common singular would be what? NIF kad. And of course, the 1CS ending is T. So I'd get a silent shiva before that under the dalet. NIF kad ti. NIF kad ti. I was visited. Okay? So basically, what are we doing here? We're learning the basic 3MS form, and you assume it throughout the rest of the paradigm, change the endings, and then any modifications as necessary based on the kind of ending you have. So what am I going to do for the 3CP? Obviously, Shurik, 2MP, Tem, right? 2FP is 10, and 1CP is new. That's easy, isn't it? You already know that. So what we need to know, what's new is, what do I do at the front end and in the middle? Well, each of these gets a noon prefix, right? What vowel does the noon always get? Always gets Keurig. What goes under root 1 in every case? Silent shiva. NIF, 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 NIF. Okay? And then I should get a pathak here. NIF kad do, but the shurik steals the dalet and kof becomes open and pretonic, and it will reduce to a vocal shiva. NIF kadu. They were visited. Here, I get NIF kad tem. I don't have to change anything. I've got 3 closed syllables. The accent does go to the heavy ending at the back. And in the cal, we had an open proprotonic syllable that reduced to vocal schwa, but nothing's open over here. NIF is closed. So nothing changes. NIF kad tem is y'all were visited. NIF kad 10. Y'all women were visited. NIF kad nu. And the accent's going to go back, since it's not heavy, to the kof. NIF kad nu. We were visited. Okay? So that's the NIF All Perfect pattern. Again, I don't want you to memorize this. What I want you to memorize is the 3MS perfect form. Okay? That's the one you need to know. If you know this, you'll know the rest of them. Okay? All right. When you think NIF All stem, what are you thinking of? Well, what's the NIF All stem start with? What letter? N, right? So you should be expecting for the NIF All Perfect a NIF All noon. Okay? This is a NIF All noon. Now let's look at our principal parts page. Now going back to the NIF All Imperfect, so we want to learn the basic pattern for the NIF All Imperfect. It is yipakade. Yipakade. And let's contrast that with Picard's cal imperfect. It's YIF code, YIF code, yippicade. What's the same here? What do you see as the same? Well, yeah, it's got the same prefix, right? The imperfect 3ms is characterized by prefix yod with no ending. The NIF All Imperfect 3ms is prefix yod and no ending. Those are the same. What's different? The internal pointing, right? The Curic's the same under the prefix, so that's good. But in the cal, I had no dot. NIF All, I get a dot. What kind of dagesh is that? That is a dagesh lene. How do I know that's a dagesh lene? I'm sorry, not dagesh lene. That's a dagesh forte. It's because it is preceded by a vowel and it's still here. Okay, so that's a doubled pay. Then I have a kametz under root 1, yipa, and then a serre theme vowel for root 2. Okay, so let's go over to our practice sheet and we'll see how this works. Okay, so looking at the imperfect here, what did we learn was the vowel pattern for the NIF All Imperfect 3ms? It's ye, doubling dot, pa, cade. Yippacade. Yippacade. Now, that dagesh forte, where is that coming from? Why is there a dagesh forte in this pay? It's because this is what we originally had. Yin, pa, cade. All right? You see your 3 root letters. What is this noon right here? That is the NIF All noon. Okay? Yinpacade is what I should have had. But what happens when a noon closes a syllable and then butts up against another consonant? What is that process called that happens to the noon? Yes, this was our Borg problem, right? It's assimilation. We have this assimilation issue. The noon is going to become a doubling dot in the final consonant and disappear. And that's why we have yip with a doubling dot in it. So it's yinpacade becomes yippacade. Okay? Now, here's the deal. If you know the basic form and you know all of your imperfect nutty prefixes and suffixes, guess what? You can parse any NIF All verb that's normal in the imperfect. Okay? Let's remind ourselves. What are the nutty prefixes going down the line? The 3ms is yod. 3fs is what? Tav. 2ms, tav. 2fs, tav. 1cs, aleph. Good. 2fs also gets what on the end? Everything's 0 ending on the left side except for 2fs. That becomes Keurig yod. Good. On the plural side, it's a prefix yod and what on the end? Shurik. 3fs is prefix tav and na. Remember that? 2mp is prefix tav with shurik on the back. 2fp, prefix tav with na on the back. In other words, the 3fp and 2fp are the same. 1cp is prefix noon. All right. What is the vowel pointing here? Every form of the nutty prefix is going to get an I-class vowel. You see Keurig is an I-class vowel, right? So I'm going to want I-class vowels here. Ye, pa, cade. T, pa, cade. T, pa, cade. T, pa, cade. Can I leave that serre here with tipacade? I'm sorry, with the Keurig yod tipacade? No, this is a vocalic ending, which means it's a vowel, and the vowel is going to cause root 3 to slide over, right? That's going to leave this open and pre-tonic. What will it do? It will reduce to what? To a vocal shava. Now notice I have a vocal shava here and I have a kametz to the right of it. That makes it look like a kametz ketuf, a short O, doesn't it? But this is really a long A. Yipakade, tipakade, right? So this is tipakadi. So what do I need to ensure that the reader knows that that is a long A? Exactly. I want a metheg there. Tipakadi. And that allows us to pronounce that shava vocally. Tipakadi. Tipakadi. And then for the 1CS, I would like a kirik as well. Ipakade. But the aleph has a vowel preference, doesn't it? What does aleph like if it can get one? Well, all gutturals like A-class vowels, but aleph has a preference for segol, doesn't it? So I am more frequently going to see epicade instead of ipicade. Okay? Epicade. Epicade. All right? So is that still an I-class vowel? Yeah, it's still I-class, but it's the I-class vowel that aleph prefers. And all the other ones will get the kirik. Okay? So, yipicade, tipicade, tipicade, tipicady, epicade. All of the nutty prefixes are the same that you've already learned. We just have different vowel pointing for the imperfect. Now, let's just talk real quickly about how we might translate these with that passive idea. If the cal imperfect of pakad, yifkod, is he will appoint or he will visit, let's do visit, then what would the NIF All Imperfect, yipakade, mean? He will be visited, okay? The imperfect will translate as future in this case, and the NIF All part of it will make that future passive, okay? So he will be visited. So how would I translate tipicade, the 3FS? It's she will be visited. The 2MS, tipicade, is you, man, will be visited. Tipicady is 2FS, so it's you, woman, will be visited. And epicade would be translated how? I will be visited. All right? Now, looking over at the plural side, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to add my vowel pointing from the basic form. Y, pa, kade, and then the shurik, yipakedu. What's going to happen to my sere when I add that vocalic shurik at the end? It's got to reduce to vocal shava. All right. It's got to reduce to vocal shava. Yipakedu. And what am I going to do to ensure that long A vowel is pronounced? Got to put a metheg here. Yipakedu. All right. For the third feminine plural, yipakade. I'm going to borrow that pattern. Tipakade. Going to add na here. And there's one change that's going to happen here. Instead of a sere, I'm going to get a pathak. Tipakadna. Okay? Tipakadna. Now, I'm not asking you to memorize these forms over here. I'm asking you to memorize the basic form, and then when you see these extra things, you'll be able to tell that it's not 3MS, but 3FP. Could you parse that? Absolutely. If you know tippa is the NIF All Imperfect vowel pointing, and you see the prefix tav and the na, then you could very easily say, oh yeah, that's got the NIF All vowel pointing, kirik under the prefix, doubling in root 1, and a kametz. That's NIF All. That's imperfect. And the tav prefix, na suffix, tells me that it's 3FP. Okay, so you could parse that, even if you don't remember that the sere becomes a pathak here. But it's tipakadna. Tipakadna. So this is they will be visited, and they, women, will be visited. The 2MP, what am I going to do? Add a kirik, add a doubling dot, add a kametz. The basic pattern is a sere here, but when I add the shurik, what will happen to the sere? It becomes vocal shava. Tipakadu, and I'm going to use a metheg to ensure my pronunciation the proper way. Tipakadu. 2FP, tip, ba, kadna. So both of these mean y'all will be visited. And then finally, 1CP, got to use my prefix noon, double root 1, kamets under it, and sere, using my basic vowel pattern here from yipakade, nipakade. How will I translate that? We will be visited. Okay? We will be visited. All right. So that is your basic pointing for the NIF All Imperfect. Now let's take a look at the principal parts page here. The next principal part is the WCI 3MS, or the Vayiktal 3MS. What have we learned about the Vayiktal, or the WCI? Well, we've learned that it is basically identical to the imperfect, except we have the special pointing of the vav prefix and the doubling dot in the nutty prefix letter. Okay? So, if we've already learned the NIF All Imperfect, all we have to do for the NIF All WCI is add the vav prefix the way WCIs point the vav. Okay? So there's really nothing new here, nothing earth-shattering. The translation value, though, is going to reflect the WCI translation value, which is what time frame? WCIs are past, right? So if I wanted to say va ye pa kade, then the NIF All tells me it's got to be passive, and the WCI form tells me it's got to be past and passive. So he was visited. Okay? And for the 3MP, it's yipa kadu with the special vav pointing. Va yipa kadu. Okay? And that's they were visited. Okay? Same translation value in terms of the pastness of WCIs, but the NIF All adds the passive notion. All right. Well, what do we learn about the jussive? Can you tell the difference between the jussive and the imperfect most of the time? Could we? No, we couldn't. So here's the good news. The NIF All's jussive is going to be identical to the NIF All's imperfect. But jussives are volitional. So instead of translating it as he will be appointed or visited, I want to express my will that this third person entity be appointed. So how am I going to translate that? It'll be something like, may he be visited or appointed, or let him be appointed. Okay? Still got to be passive because it's NIF All, but we're going to add the volitional jussive semantics to it. All right, so let him be appointed. The cohortative. By the way, just because I have only representative forms here doesn't mean that that's all there is. Okay? I could have a second person jussive. I could have a third jussive that's third masculine plural, and that would be let them be appointed, and so forth. So I'm only giving you one of a range of possibilities on the principal parts. The cohortative 1CS is epikada. Now, let's take a look at our practice sheet here. I'll show you how this was formed. For the 1CS imperfect, it's going to be epikade. That's my basic imperfect 1CS in the NIF All. What do you know about the cohortatives? The cohortatives basically take the imperfect 1CS and they add what at the end? They add a comets hey. Remember, the cohortatives add a comets hey. So epikade in the NIF All is going to be for the cohortative epikada. Okay, where's the accent going to be? It's always going to be on the vocalic ending. Comets A is a vowel, so this is a vocalic ending. And since the dalet's going to slide over and go with the vowel, that's going to leave this open and pretonic. And what will happen to the sere? It's going to reduce. So it becomes vocal shava, and that means my comets needs a metheg to signal that that's a long A. Epakada. Epakada. I could also see a kirik here. Ipakada, as you know. So segol or kirik are both possible. They're still I-class vowels. Okay? How will I translate this? As a cohortative, may I, but it's not active. It's not may I visit. It's passive. May I be visited or appointed. Okay? Epakada. What would the first common plural cohortative look like? Well, the imperfect first common plural in the NIF All is nipakade. What am I going to add to make it cohortative? Add a comets hey. What's going to happen to my sere here? It will reduce to a vocal shava, and I'll get a metheg here. Nipakada. How would we translate this? Just exchange the I for we. May we be visited. Okay? Or may we be appointed. Or let us be appointed or visited. Okay? All right. The next principal part under the cohortative is the imperative to MS, so the one with no ending. Look at the NIF All's vowel pointing. It is similar to the imperfect yipakade, but it's not quite the same. It's hipakade. I've basically taken yipakade, all the vowel pointing for the NIF All Imperfect, and I've just replaced the yod with a hey. So I get a hey prefix for the NIF All imperative, hipakade. Okay? Now, here's a question for you. Is this hey, is that one of your 4 nutty prefixes? No. So you should never see a NIF All imperative and think that there's an imperfect prefix there. It's not. Remember what one of the things we said about the imperative is that the imperative it looks like the imperfect, but without the nutty prefixes, because we always chop those off, right? So you'll never see the imperfect prefixes on the imperative. So the hey that you're seeing has nothing to do with the imperfect. This is just a characteristic vowel that the NIF All has adapted to make up its imperative form. The NIF All uses a prefix hey for its imperative formation. But all the vowel pointing is the same as the imperfect. It's hipakade, hipakade. All right? So let's just apply this now to the other forms. We'll go to our imperative here. And if my 2MS basic NIF All imperative is hipakade, then the 2FS will be the same, hipakade, but with one minor change. What do I add to the 2FS on the back side? It's a kirik yod. Remember that? It's a kirik yod. Go back to your boxes here. You see how the imperative, the front end is always the same. There's no imperfect prefix. If there is a stem prefix, like the NIF All has a hey, then you'll see the hey there. But the endings are these in the imperative, either nothing, e, u, or na. So I've got the e here. So hipakade becomes hipakade. What's going to happen to my sere? It's got to reduce when I add that vocalic ending, right? So it becomes hipakade. And I get a metheg here. Hipakade. So how would I translate this? This is be visited. Feminine is identical, right? I'm telling a woman, be visited. What would the form be in the 2MP imperative for the NIF All? If I'm starting with hipakade, What do I add to the end to make it you guys? I add shurik, right? And that's a vowel, so what's going to happen? Dalet's going to slide over and lead the vowel, and the kofs sere will be open and pretonic, and it will reduce to a vocal shava. So I get hippakadu. That's telling a group of men, be appointed. And then finally, for you women, it's going to be hippakadna. Okay? It'd be hippakade, add the na, and remember the sere becomes a pathak here. Hippakadna. And that's telling a group of women, be appointed. Okay? You can see the I-class vowel, the doubling dot in root 1, and the kamets, and all these forms. That is characteristic of NIF All pointing. And so that's going to be different from the cal pointing of the imperative. What's next is the participle. Okay? The participle is going to be pointed nifkad. It has a prefix noon visible here, nifkad. Where else did we see a NIF All noon prefix visible? In the NIF All perfect. Okay? Everywhere else, the NIF All's noon assimilates, and it becomes part of the doubling dot in root 1. But in the NIF All perfect, you actually see the NIF All noon, and in the NIF All participle, you see the NIF All noon. There's one difference between these two. They look almost the same except for the theme vowel, right? You see I have a pathak under root 2 for the perfect. For the participle, I have a kamets. This is a short A. The participle gets a long A. I want to tell you something about that A. That long A is irreducibly long. Okay? So the NIF All participle is going to be nifkad. I'm sorry, yes, nifkad. But instead of a pathak, which is what the perfect looks like, it's got a long A, and it is irreducibly long. Irreducibly long. It will not reduce to a vocal shava. What does that mean? That means if I want to make the participle feminine singular, nifkad becomes nifkada. Add a kamete. What would normally happen as this becomes open and pretonic? It would normally reduce to a vocal shava, right? It will not do that here. Okay? It is going to stay long A. That is a characteristic of the NIF All participle. This passive, the accent's going to go to the end. It'll be nifkada. Nifkada. So it is going to stay where I normally expect it to stay, but the vowel reduction's not going to happen. Okay? It's irreducibly long, that kamets. Nifkad, nifkada. Nifkada. Okay? So if the cal participle means appointing, then the NIF All participle, if it makes it passive, would be appointed. Appointed. Okay? And you can use these participles in the NIF All the way you use other participles. I could say the appointed man. Ha'ish ha'nifkad. The man, the appointed. So just remember that if the NIF All verb has passive meaning, then I'm going to be using the ed type of ending. Appointed, smoked, right? The smoked. I was going to say weed. I don't want to say that. The smoked tobacco. Nah. The smoked fish. Yeah, let's do food. That's better. Okay. Anyhow, the masculine plural form, nifkad, becomes nifkad what? Nifkadim. Okay? And I don't reduce the kamets. And the feminine plural is nifkad what? Nifkad ot. Right? Nifkad ot. And again, I do not ever reduce the Komets. It's irreducibly long. Alrighty. Last two principal parts are the infinitives. The infinitives. The infinitive construct is going to be identical to the imperative form. So we have hippocade for be visited, and hippocade as the NIF All Infinitive construct, the act of being visited, or the act of being appointed. Okay? And just as with the cal infinitive construct, I could add pronominal suffixes to the end. I could also add prepositions to the beginning. So if I added a bet preposition, it would be something like when he was appointed. Okay? If I added a lamed preposition, it would be something like in order to be appointed, and so forth. And then the infinitive absolute has two forms, one with the hey prefix and the NIF All noon assimilated into the pay, or with the noon prefix outside the pay and nothing before it. So NIF code and HIPAA code, okay? The operative thing being that the last part has the holum vav, or if it's spelled defectively, it could just be a holum, just like PA code in the cal infinitive absolute, okay? And again, these will be used the same way. Emphasis uses, the infinitive absolute will occur with the main verb and share the same root. Complementary use, the infinitive absolute will occur with a second infinitive absolute, and one of them will match the roots of the main verb. So the more common use, of course, is the emphasis use. All right. Well, that's really all I want to say about how to form these. The last thing really to say from the chapter is how do we translate the infinitive, the NIF All verbs. So let me just say this, okay? The most frequent, so this is why I'm going to number it number 1. The most frequent way or meaning of using a verb in the NIF All stem is to make the meaning of the cal passive. Okay? If a verb has a meaning in the cal that's active and transitive, that is to say, if I can take a direct object with it, then I could see it used in the NIF All with passive semantics. Okay? Think, for example, John ate rice. Okay? I could use the cal form of the verb akal, to eat, for that. If I want to then make this passive, rice was eaten, okay, what would I do? I would use the NIF All of that verb to eat. Okay, rice was eaten. So that is by and large the most common way to see the NIF All used. It's to take a verb that exists in the cal with active and transitive use or force, and then to make it passive in meaning. Now, that is not the only use, though, of the NIF All stem. There are some other ones as well. So we could see the NIF All used for reflexive and reciprocal meaning. Okay? So let's take a look at a couple of possibilities here. Okay, so makar, cal perfect 3ms, he sold. Nimkar, that's a NIF All perfect 3ms. There's actually a couple of possibilities, okay? Could this be passive? Just merely a passive idea? The answer is yes. So I could translate this as he was sold, right? If the context were clear enough, I could say something like Yosef nimkar. Joseph was sold, right? Because he didn't sell himself. Someone else sold him. But the NIF All, nimkar, could also be reflexive instead of passive. And then it could be something like he sold himself. Okay? If, for example, I'm talking about the evil of some king, who sold himself to do evil, I could use the NIF All for that. Nimkar. Okay? So you see how that works? That's the reflexive idea. The reciprocal idea, well, here, let me just make sure we're clear on this. If something's reflexive, that means that the subject acts upon himself. Okay? When we have reciprocal idea, then the idea is always that there are plural subjects. Don't act on themselves, but act on one another. Okay? Somehow they affect one another through their reciprocal action. So we have the verbs ra'u, which is the cow perfect, 3 CP. Okay? This is they saw in the cow. They saw. We could make this NIF All perfect, 3 CP. That would be near u. And just so you know, this is an irregular verb, so it doesn't look exactly like what you're expecting because my NIF All noon prefix is here, my shurik is here, but I only have 2 root letters. Most of my verbs have 3, okay? So this is weak in that way, but it doesn't matter. The idea is still the same. If this is reciprocal, it's they saw, and it's not they saw themselves like they stared at at their body parts. It's that one of them saw the other one, and that one saw the first one. Okay? So this is they saw one another, or they saw each other, depending on how many people we're talking about, right? Each other means 2 people, and one another in English is supposed to be more than 2 people. Okay, so anyhow, the NIF All is used for reciprocal action as well. Okay? Near u could also be they were seen. It could have just merely passive meaning. And again, you need to know what your context is to know what's the best way to translate it. All right. And then there is a third sort of catch-all category, okay? And the third catch-all category is basically unpredictable. All right? That is to say, you could have a meaning of a verb in the NIF All where the meaning doesn't have any clear passive, reflexive, or reciprocal meaning. It just happens to have a particular meaning in the NIF All. Many times, there'll be a verb that you'll run across that doesn't have any cal form at all. It's never used in the cal stem, but it's used in the NIF All stem. And it'll have a particular meaning in the NIF All stem. And so when that happens, how are you going to know what it means? Well, you have to look at your lexical entry. You have to look at your lexicon, or you have to look at your vocabulary lists and find out what does that verb mean in the NIF All stem. Okay? So one of the examples that Ross gives us is the verb lacham. Okay, so this is lamed chet mem. The NIF All is nil cham. That's NIF All perfect. And this means he fought. Okay? That is just what the NIF All of lacham means. He fought. Does that have any passive meaning to you? Is he being passive here? He fought. No. Nothing passive about this. There's nothing reflexive about it. This is just what the NIF All of lacham means. Okay, to fight. To fight, to engage in battle. Okay? Here's another one. The verb aman, from which we get the word amen. Okay? The NIF All perfect is ne, man. Don't worry about the guttural here. This is a weak verb because it's guttural in root 1 position. So it is irregular. We're going to learn more about this in chapters 32 and 33. But in the NIF All, it has a meaning. He was faithful. Okay? That is to say, the NIF All meaning of aman is to be faithful. To be faithful. We don't see the verb aman used in the cal. it's used in the NIF All with the meaning of being faithful. Okay? So he was faithful. He was faithful. All right, so you just have to learn what these verbs can mean in the NIF All, some of them. All right. Well, I'll stop there with the explanation of the chapter.